Chapter 34. Wildcat in the Ozarks. 1920s. Wildcat. A name for corn whiskey. He liked to take a snort of wildcat. The year 1926 brought the birth of a new highway that would become the most famous road across America. Winding 2,448 miles through 8 states, it stretched from Chicago, Illinois to Santa Monica, California. The entire route was not paved until 1938, with much of it being only 9 feet wide. Route 66 created a link between the Midwest and the West Coast. The concrete highway also created businesses all along it for travelers and commerce in the years to come. In a distant future, it gave passage for some of the harnesses to travel to California. Prohibition had crushed the white oak barrel business in Searcy County, as the manufacturing of whiskey was illegal. It had also prohibited the common practice of making moonshine in the Ozark Hills. Making shine had long been a part of the tradition of those who had come to the hill country. Many of the Scotch-Irish descendants brought the craft with them to this country and adapted the recipe using corn and barley. Liquid corn was worth $1.50 a pint or $12 a gallon during Prohibition years. At the ending of the 18th Amendment in 1933, there were 23,165 stills seized by federal agents. In the previous year of 1932. That is an indication of how popular the illegal manufacturing and sale of moonshine was. Riley Harness never made or used liquor, yet many did. Records indicate that after Prohibition, 6,000 illegal stills were seized by federal agents in Arkansas and Missouri. From 1920 till 1983, 196 agents were killed in the line of duty, most of them during Prohibition. I have no knowledge of Giles Turney making liquor, but he did use it. I was told a story by a neighbor of Giles who both made and drank shine, that on a warm summer day, he was driving his wagon down the trail with his family aboard where he was crossing a holler. He came upon Giles, who stepped out of the trail to let the man pass by, and they both paused to visit a bit in the hot sun. As Giles wiped his brow of sweat, a sudden pop was made as a cork shot out of Giles' back pocket and flew up over his shoulder. The heat had made the pint of Redbird, as he called it, erupt and expose its whereabouts. Although moonshining was relatively profitable in a cash-strapped economy, it was also hard and dangerous work during Prohibition and the days following. It was a forerunner to the illegal manufacturing of drugs that would come to the Ozarks in about 70 years. The consumption of all alcoholic beverages didn't dry up when the laws changed. It drove the price of hooch through the roof and compelled poor people to make Mountain Dew. As with cooking meth, cooking White Lightning can be deadly when the shiner is only after profit. Unsanitary conditions, or diluting it with kerosene, made for bad whiskey, but it turned deadly if not distilled properly, causing high levels of methanol, methyl alcohol. It can affect the eyes and cause blindness or death. Another hazard was the lead soldiers used to weld the copper joints. More than a few people died after drinking this type of toxic brew, which leads me into a story of a relative when I was a boy. Uncle Clyde, as my dad called him, had grown up in both Arkansas and Oklahoma, as many of the family did. Later in his life, he moved on to a dairy farm near us, and his sweet wife, Lou, helped him work the farm. Clyde was rough on the edges, as some would say, and he would eat peppers with tears running down his cheeks. My dad got old Clyde to attending church, and he was saved and baptized, but it wasn't long till he began to run sideways, as my dad would say. He tried to hide his drinking and kept his moonshine stashed away from sight. As I remember the events, Clyde got really sick and died. Sometime later, one of his sons went to the farm to help Lou prepare everything for a farm auction. In the process of going through the barns and buildings, he found stashes of the clear liquid in bottles or jars. I remember my dad finding some of it after the farm auction when we were helping Lou clean up an old building. It looked to be as harmless as water, but Dad told of how Clyde's son had put some of it up to his lip, and it burned and formed a scab. It was like drinking lye water, he said. I was puzzled why anyone would want to drink something like that. Another name for moonshine is wildcat, which leads me into another story of a four-footed type. Giles would drink wildcat, and he also liked to hunt when he had his chores done. One of his neighbor buddies was a man by the name of Andrew Treadwell. At that time, Giles lived on the homestead of Turney Ridge, and Andrew lived across the hollow of Lick Branch. There was plenty of wild game to hunt and no hunting regulations. The wild turkey was a tasty meal, and Giles would feed his young daughter Etta Melinda bites of the tender meat. Etta Melinda, my granny, told me that her folks said she would cry for turkey when she was hungry, but she thought they might have given her chicken or something else to pacify her when there was no turkey. Granny told me that Giles could make the sound of a turkey and call them up using his mouth, but on this particular morning, as he hunted with Andrew, he was having no luck getting the turkeys to come to his call. However, he spotted a wildcat coming to his calls, known as a bobcat today. When the wildcat was in range, Giles shot, and the cat ran away wounded. The wildcat was struggling to get away, and Giles instinctively ran after it without reloading his shotgun. As he closed in on the fleeing cat, he could see that it was headed toward a small cave in a bluff. Giles was in hot pursuit of the wildcat as it darted into the small cave, and he made a leap to grab it, but missed. However, his momentum caused him to slide into the dark opening, where his eyes had to adjust to the poor light. Soon he made out the eyes of the cat looking at him within short range. Suddenly, the wildcat sprang at Giles, and in a moment of luck, he caught the cat with his hands by its neck. Pulling the fighting animal down to the ground, he put his knee into its chest and strangled the wildcat. He had killed it with his bare hands. Children in generations to come would be mesmerized by his story of killing the wildcat. There was no turkey for Etta Melinda that day, but what a tale to tell as he skinned the bobcat for its valuable pelt. I never heard what kind of injuries he got from the scuffle, but I can't imagine him not getting some scratches from it. Giles was a tough and strong man, but small in stature. Giles also liked to tell of himself out hunting one day, when he noticed a man walking through the woods, and came within a short distance of Giles, who remained still. He said they never spoke, but he never saw a man with such ghastly-looking features. He called him a wild man. His description of the beastly-looking wild man makes one wonder if it was an Ozark's version of Bigfoot, Sasquatch. It was another hair-raising story for children when gathered around the fireplace at night. Wild cats and wild men were always a favorite. Funny how children love to be scared, and yet they don't like it. Reflection. Making alcohol is as ancient as the times of Noah. He planted a vineyard and made wine after the great flood. Genesis 9:20. Today, an estimated 7% of the U.S. population cannot drink in moderation. For some, the drink causes the wildcat to come out in them. Whether you believe in abstinence or moderation, food and drink need to be enjoyed as sustenance and not as an indulgence only. Wine is a mocker, strong drink a brawler, and whoever is intoxicated by it is not wise. Proverbs 20:1 gives strong drink to him who is perishing, and wine to him whose life is bitter. Proverbs 31:6